appreciate, right, the truth of their financial position, they're not going to act so irresponsibly. I mean, everybody was drugged. Everybody was under this illusion, this mass hysteria of phony paper wealth. And the average American, isn't just, spending because he's just completely careless and couldn't give a damn. He actually believed that he didn't need to. And people are starting to understand that that's not the case. And, of course, the people that were lending us all this money that we were consuming, they're understanding that that was a foolish thing to do and that they're not going to get paid back. So the lenders don't want to lend. The borrowers don't want to borrow. So this is what has to happen. How anybody can be surprised that retail sales are falling, they're going to keep falling. They're going to fall for years. They're going a lot lower. This is the solution. This is part of this. This is good. This is a good thing. The problem is the government's going to resist this. The government's going to try to prevent this from happening. The government's going to try to encourage more spending when that's how we got into this mess. Anyway, talking about getting into messes, it just amazes me how Alan Greenspan can deny responsibility for the housing bubble. He gave a speech, I think it was yesterday, in front of the National Association of Realtors. And he basically said, with a straight face, that his interest rate policy, his low interest rates, had nothing to do with the housing bubble. He said it had nothing to do with mortgage rates. It had nothing to do with subprime. He was totally innocent. That if the Fed funds rate at 1% played no role, that it could have been 5%, 1%, it didn't matter. That this housing bubble and his 1% interest rates, it was just a coincidence. This is what this guy says. I mean, it's unbelievable. Now, one of the things he's trying to say to prove his point, he says, well, mortgage rates are not set by the Fed funds rate. He says they're set by the long-term government bonds, by 10-year or 30-year government bonds, and we don't control those. Well, yeah, I suppose 30-year fixed-rate mortgages go off of those bonds, but not adjustable-rate mortgages. Adjustable-rate mortgages are set based on Fed funds or LIBOR or all sorts of short-term overnight rates that were direct function of Greenspan's policies. And remember, the problem in subprime in the mortgage sector is not all the 30-year fixed-rate mortgages. Those are not the mortgages that are the problem. The problems were all the people utilizing ARMs, utilizing teaser rates. I mean, the reason that Americans were able to overpay for homes was because of the teaser rate. They were able to get a house they couldn't afford because for the first few years they had an artificially low payment courtesy of Alan Greenspan. How he can say that he's not responsible for that housing bubble when he's the one that gave Americans the tools with which to overpay for houses. Without 1% short-term rates, there were no low teaser rates. There were no 5-in-1 ARMs or negative AM or interest only. All of this stuff was a direct result of his low short-term interest rates. And if he can't see that, then he's even, more foolish than I thought. And I'm surprised the media doesn't jump all over him because the statement is asinine on its face. Also, Greenspan tried to say that, well, when we started raising rates, we tried to get interest rates to go up. We wanted mortgage rates to rise, but it didn't happen. That even though we were raising rates, mortgage rates came down, long-term rates came down, and so it's not my fault. He's saying we tried to get rates up, but it didn't work. Well, they didn't try very hard. You remember this famous measured, we will increase interest rates at a pace that's measured? Remember that? So every time the Fed met, every 2 or 3 months, they raised interest rates by 1/4 of a point, 25 basis points. So it took 2 or 3 years for the Fed to normalize rates from 1% to 5%. Now, if Alan Greenspan was raising rates at 1/4 point at a time, and he was upset that that was not having the desired effect on long-term rates, don't you think he would have changed that policy? Don't you think he would have said, you know what, this measured increase in rates is not working, so I'm going to go up 100 basis points right now? Don't you think he would have done that? And had he done that, I'm sure it would have had an effect on interest rates. The fact that he continued in that measured pace, despite the fact that he now claims it wasn't producing his desired reaction on the long rate obviously proves he's lying, because he must have been happy with what was happening. Otherwise, he would have changed that measured pace. In fact, the fact that the Fed was so predictable and everybody knew that interest rates were only going to go up by 25 basis points, that's one of the reasons that the teaser rates stayed so low for so long, because everybody knew what the risk was. It was every meeting, it was another quarter point. And had Greenspan taken that punch bowl away quicker, the country would not be in nearly as much trouble as it is now. I mean, certainly we were in trouble anyway. We had problems. But now we got massive problems. But Alan Greenspan is at the center of it. He was the single most important factor in the whole bubble. I've said that there was a deck of playing cards for the characters that were instrumental in the housing bubble. Alan Greenspan would be the ace of spades. In fact, he'd probably be all the aces. He might be all the face cards. I mean, there are other people, other government officials and some people in the private sector whose images I would put on those cards. But it's clear that the kingpin, the ringleader, the guy that blew the most air into this bubble was Alan Greenspan, and he can stand there with a straight face and deny any responsibility. It's absolutely amazing. Anyway, let me grab the phones. Everybody's been holding on. Let me talk to Gomer, I guess, in New York. Is that correct?
Peter.
Yes.
Thank you for writing Crash Proof. There's one error in there I think you should correct. I mentioned it to Mr. Scott, your New York branch manager. You're talking about junk silver, and you got it in a couple of places the date of 1968.
Yeah, it should be. I know it should be 1965. I hope they fix that. I've sent it. Wiley has been very lax at fixing the typos and the things, the errors. I mean, I've known about that error for a long time, and I tried to fix it. Hopefully they'll get it fixed in the revised issue. I've finished revising Crash Proof. So Crash Proof 2.0 is going to be coming out in September, and there's a lot of good material in there. Hopefully we don't have too much of a dramatic change in things between now and the time the book comes out, or I might have to do some last-minute editing. But it's all put to bed. Everything is done. I just,
I'm looking forward.
I haven't seen that, but hopefully they fix that about the dates. But there's a few other mistakes in Crash Proof. I was actually surprised at how many typos. And initially, I sent the publisher a long list of things that needed to be corrected. And then I assumed they had corrected them. And I think I found out a year later that they hadn't even made any of the corrections I sent them. And they've had, Crash Proof is in something like its 18th printing. I mean, it's sold over 150,000 copies so far, and they keep printing them a little bit at a time. But I can only imagine how many copies Crash Proof would have sold if it was ever advertised. There was never an ad for Crash Proof, never on radio, never on television, never in print. Wiley did not spend one dime promoting that book.
Amazing.
And it sold better than 150,000 copies on its own.
Tell me about
And that was my first book, the first book I ever wrote. Go ahead.
Well, I enjoyed it. Tell me about TBT or PST. Are those good opportunities if the Treasury bills, if your prediction about Treasury bills comes true?
Well, I think long-term interest rates are eventually going to go way up. I mean, rates, if you look at the rate on the 30-year, it's been backing up now for a couple of months. And, yields continue to move higher on Treasuries, and I'm sure the Fed is trying to prevent that from happening by moving into the market and buying bonds and creating inflation. But remember, the more bonds the government buys, the less those bonds are worth, because when they when they print dollars to buy bonds, they make the dollar worth less, which is what bonds are. Bonds are promises to be paid in dollars. And there's some more articles again about the threat of the U.S. government losing its AAA rated status, which, in my mind, it lost that a long time ago. It's just that Moody's and Standard & Poor's don't have the balls to officially recognize what should be obvious. And these are the same guys that rated a lot of the subprime junk, AAA, right until it became worthless. Anyway, thanks for the call. Let me go to Mike in Virginia.
Yeah, hi, Peter.